Good. Well, that pretty well, almost, but not quite, brings us to the end of the Carter Jonas Game Fair Theatre on Saturday. And with active members of the audience like that, I'm going to keep on going. Well done. The last item of today is the Field Sports Channel shareholders meeting, which is simply me doing a stand-up routine with a little bit of help from David. So let's start with... Anybody here a Field Sports Channel shareholder? Can you put your hands in the air? Yes, I know some faces. Good, we've got a few there. Marvellous. It's not compulsory. I have to say, if we're going to be doing anything which requires us to vote, we'll obviously do that by email afterwards. And anything we're going to be doing about votes comes from the questions, which will come after my short presentation. What I want to talk about really is where we are with social media and the internet and shooting and what we could possibly do. I've had a couple of days sitting on the sofa here, listening to everybody else and trying to bite my tongue. So this is a bit where I get to bore you instead of somebody else boring you. I think we'll start with a little bit of help from David. Now, David's not here because he's in Africa, lucky boy, and he is helping Paul Childerley look for large animals, which you'll be seeing shortly on the channel. Let's start with David introducing the topics that I want to cover.
This is Field Sports Channel's Game Fair Theatre News. And the top story, the antis are still being a pain in the neck. Here is the biggest offender, Chris Packham.
So yes, Chris Packham has been using YouTube particularly, and I'm sure you all know YouTube is not just the basis of our business, but it is one of my great bugbears. It's one of the places the BBC go to look for stories when they want to present items on our world. And as we saw this morning in this theatre, when it's a Radio 4 Today programme took place here, they cannot cover shooting without covering the antis. They cannot see shooting as a normal activity. They always have to drag the antis into it one way or another. We won the round this morning. It's always a little bit like the Western Front. It's always 200 yards forward and 100 yards back. But we did it this morning thanks to Rachel Carey, who presented very beautifully on the subject of shooting. But Chris Packham is a problem at the moment. He is trying to monster gamekeepers. I mean, there are lots of structural reasons why this is going to work for shooting. If you've got the RSPB takes over the world of upland management, of woodland management, and they don't have any, there's no threat from gamekeepers, and then they kind of achieve a monopoly, which is good for them. And I have to say, whatever good work the RSPB does, I'm not sure that a monopoly situation is good for them, and I'm sure many of us would agree that some of the stuff they do, particularly in the area of monstering gamekeepers, is a very bad thing. To give you a sense of what's up at the moment, in 2016, the antis reported 81 dead raptors. They found 81 dead raptors. There was not a single conviction for any of those birds. Now, Chris Packham's line is that proves we're all criminals, that there was not a single conviction for any of those birds. I don't quite see how that works. But we have got to fight him on this one, and as I say, he's using YouTube. A lot of people are using YouTube against him. Basque is doing a good job. The Pace Brothers, The Shooting Show, Team Wild. We're trying to put up stories that explain shooting, that have a backstory to them, so you can't just go, look, there's a thing, bang, it's dead. You now have to say why. It's thanks to help from the viewers of Field Sports Channel, from you, the shareholders among you, that we were able to put one punch. You funded one punch against Packham this year.
Did animal rights activists stage the death of Fred?
My duty to tell you a very sad short story about the short life of this magnificent bird, Fred the golden eagle.
On the 15th of February, BBC presenter Chris Packham released a film on YouTube suggesting that a golden eagle he calls Fred, hatched last year, was killed by a gamekeeper, and its satellite tag, maybe still attached to the eagle's carcass, was dumped in the North Sea. Then a new film by Packham on the 22nd of March says he has been given access to some more data. The film is shot in the same place, with Packham wearing the same clothes and the same snow on the ground as a month before. The movement of sunlight on the tree Packham sits on suggests the new data arrived a matter of minutes after Packham finished shooting the first film. Both films are a useful fundraiser for the RSPB, which links its attacks on gamekeepers to its membership marketing. Thanks to Andy Richardson for spotting this. Andy recently received a letter from solicitors acting for Chris Packham complaining about his campaigning against the BBC star.
Now, we're able to put that out, and we're able to see off Packham in that point, and I'm going to come on to hypocrisy later on. This sounds like a vicious, one-sided attack on the RSPB, but I think we have to make these points because this is the context within which Field Sports Channel is trying to work at the moment. Thanks to you, we continue to celebrate, yes, what the people of Malta have done. They too have seen off Packham. He tried to end hunting in an EU member state. In 2015, they held a referendum, and the hunters won. Now, I'm talking about things that you might not personally necessarily agree with. A lot of people don't like the style of hunting that takes place in Malta. It's turtle dove hunting, and if you believe everything he says, that has an impact on turtle dove populations in the UK. But of course, it doesn't. I mean, that is one of the lies he tells. The turtle doves that go to Malta do not end up in the UK. I'm talking about the kind of hunting that some of us don't like. For example, Americans going to Africa to decorate their houses. I mean, that is not universally popular in the UK. But I have to say that the Chinese have a different view altogether. They like to wound things on their way to the kitchen, and we all dislike that. And both the Chinese and the Americans find it strange that we like to save the village from the leopard, that we shoot pheasants as they're driven towards us. So we have to accept we're not going to build a consensus in world hunting here. What we're going to do is accept that we all hunt, perhaps try to change opinions, especially the Chinese, and I think above all defend what we all do, because we're now in this universal media marketplace that is YouTube. We're going to have to stick together. One of the issues from the last couple of years is the Cecil the Lion effect, which continues. The story from 2015 doesn't seem to have the resonance it used to. It has moved on. I mean, the reaction from the Zimbabwe Information Minister when he was told about Cecil the Lion in 2015 was, "What lion?" which I think is the reaction any of us should have gone for, but we find ourselves on the back foot with that story. And the situation today is perhaps best characterized by Tess Thompson Talley from Kentucky, who shoots a black coloured giraffe and is paraded through the newspapers. And black is a rare colour for a giraffe, and she is a woman, and the media jump on the idea that she's shot a rare animal, which of course she hasn't. She shot a rare coloured animal. So there's quite a lot of ignorance that the antis will jump on if they can and use against us. And once again, YouTube is where they'll do that. The good news is Chris Packham doesn't come cheap. A lot of media activity online is about fundraising and follows the basic RSPCA principle: send me £5 or the baby kitten gets it. Here is a real news story. David, please.
The RSPCA continues to kill half of the animals it takes in. It claims it rescued and collected 114,584 animals last year. That means they put down more than 50,000 animals. This is a film about a kitten it successfully rescued, rehomed and issued as a fundraising video.
Now, on the fundraising front, there are two big pots of cash available to the antis as far as we can tell at the moment. One of them is I4, which is an American group, and they were the people who helped fund the ban on fox hunting by Tony Blair in 2004-2005. Recently, they've actually been funding things we might broadly agree with. I don't suspect all of us are in favour of the shooting of whales. I don't suspect all of us are in favour of international wildlife trafficking. In fact, I suspect most of us are against both those things, and I4 has been funding that. That doesn't excuse I4, but it's interesting that they seem to have gone off the boil about hunting. The big funding pot available at the moment comes from the soap company Lush, which is started by a man called Mark Constantine. We have tried to engage with Mark Constantine. We would like to interview him, obviously. He's just the money man, so he might be available for us to do this. So far, he's resisted, and so I'm afraid that means war.
In other news, Mark Constantine of soap shop Lush bought a McDonald's quarter pounder today.
Okay, well, that didn't happen. But the way we win these actions is by outing hypocrisy. That's our role. The very best way to knock an attack from the antis on the head is to show that that anti is a hypocrite. And the best example I can give you of that is dear old Brian May, who's so popular with Field Sports Channel viewers that David even wears a special Brian May wig to do Brian May stories. Now, sadly, he's stopped really hitting out at us. He does the occasional I don't like the Badger Carl film. And there's a reason for that, and I'm glad to say it was all thanks to us. And I'm going to tell you this story because it still makes me laugh. So going back a few years, Brian and I had a spat on Urban Foxes Live on Channel 4. And I mean, I have to say, he's TV gold. You know, he won that one resoundingly, but I was the evil fox shooter, so I didn't really have a chance. I wasn't expecting to win that. Interestingly, the two people who tried to tear me apart, and it's interesting being torn apart by wild animal rights activists, were two RSPCA people. And Brian saw this, and he didn't like it because he knows that bullying somebody on television does not look good. So on telly, in the interview, he tried to make friends with me. I was suitably naive. I'm so naive, I didn't realize what he was doing until I had about 2 comments to go, and then I was able to make hay. But he started saying things like, Charlie, you seem like a nice sort of bloke, and Charlie, I like you, but... And then he would go at it like that. So he's a clever, clever man. Imagine my delight a few months later when somebody in Dorset tipped me off that he had been letting the deer stalking in woodlands locally. So I phoned that through to my friends at the Sunday Times, and a good friend of mine called Kevin Dowling went down to check it out. And Kevin, he's from Carlow. He's a very good journalist. A very dogged journalist, and he asked around, and he said, is it true that Brian May allows hunting and shooting on his land? And of course all the locals said, no, it's not true at all, it's terrible. Can't go shooting on his land because he doesn't allow it. So Brian said, well, that's not really a story, is it? Not Brian, Kevin. Kevin said, that's not really a story, is it? What shall I do now? And while this is taking place, Kevin's obviously asking Brian May and his people. And Brian was attached to a Surrey wildlife rehab centre at the time, and they were sending him emails saying things like, Mr. May wouldn't harm the hair on the head of a single wild creature, so, you know, this is not a story. So Kevin rang me up and I said, well, have you tried the game dealer? Because one of the good things, just as far as this story is concerned, but a bad thing generally that Tony Blair did was to close down most of the game dealers, and there are only a few left. So Kevin went to the game dealer and she said, do you want to see the receipts? Now, this is very good news indeed. Kevin said, yes, please. And he got an email from Brian May's folk going, well, Mr. May allows the culling of certain sick animals under certain circumstances. So we thought, right, we're on to something now. By the time it got to the Saturday, one day before the Sunday Times comes out, Kevin is sitting with the stalker in South Wales looking at the photograph, and Brian May himself rings up and goes, it's a fair cop, I'll come quietly. Which, of course, he didn't. After the story came out, he started blaming the forces of the Countryside Alliance. And ironically, poor old Countryside Alliance, they're at the heart of, they're behind many of the punches we managed to inflict on the antis, but this wasn't one of theirs. But we did manage to get him, and he appears to have gone to ground. Personally, I believe if you want to lecture me about the evils of hunting, the cruelty of hunting, you have got to come from a position of complete purity. You can't wear leather shoes, you can't live in a house, you can't drive a car, and anything else is hypocrisy. But we live in a media age, and if we're going to put this out on YouTube, and the rest of the world is going to judge us well for this, it needs to be balanced. We need to score a palpable hit. I think that the problem with the people we're fighting, and I'm making this whole talk about the people we're fighting, is that it's a little bit like saying to the little girl in the nativity play that she's absolutely lovely and she goes on to become an actress. At some stage, antis have kind of joined their anti-tribe because they've extended their virtue at people. They said how lovely the fluffy animal is. And somebody said, what a nice thing that is. And they have gone from that to this awful belief set which is committed to bringing us down. We will catch out Mark Constantine in the end, and I hope it's enough of a knockout blow. The antis have had a few lucky breaks this year. They've made a lot of noise online, and there are still politicians, there are many politicians who think that following an animal rights agenda will make them more popular, and it's led to the Polish president banning under-18s not just from going hunting, but from going out with other hunters. Now, Poland seems an awfully long way away from here, but this is the kind of thing which winds its way towards us. We have also seen the Labour Welsh governments not quite committing themselves to, but certainly saying they want to end pheasant shooting in Wales. This is a lot closer to home. So we're talking about trying to change an environment where this kind of thing can take place. One thing we're committed to doing in Field Sports Channel, one of the reasons we have done this share raise, is to keep up the media on the little sports that get easily ignored. So the falconries, the fox huntings, the ferretings. They make great TV, and it's up to us to put them out there. We need to get this funded, and it's thanks to you that we're able to do that. We're able to pay for the camera people to get out there and put these films online. If you set up as an animal rights warrior today, you've got several things going for you. You've got a media that clearly doesn't like trophy hunting. We've had Jerome Starkey from the Times here. He's gone a long way today towards supporting everything we do, but you can tell he can't sell trophy hunting to his readership. And there are still many of us who don't like trophy hunting, so I'm just going to ask you to accept it for the fact it takes place. There are, if you're an eco-warrior today, a few rich organisations prepared to fund you, Lush being one of them. And there is a large and often relatively toothless community, and one of the really good things that's come out of this is this call from this stage, from almost everybody who's been on here, please to stand up, to be loud and proud about and for your sport. It's one of the mottos of Field Sports Channel. We've had one person here, he was a fox lamper who was making the case for trying to hide our lights under bushels, for not telling everybody what it is we do. We had people from Basques saying, give yourself credibility on social media. I am a Basque member and I believe that. I am a Countryside Alliance member and I believe that. And of course, I'm from Field Sports Channel. I'd ask you to add, I am a Field Sports Channel viewer and I would say this. When you're talking to people online, it's often a hopeless case. You know, like the Western Front, we're going to make a few yards, we're going to lose a few yards, but it is still worth doing, because when you put it on social media, even if you're not going to win against the person you're talking to, you might sway the opinion of somebody who's reading that conversation, especially if you stay reasonable. Field Sports Channel TV is here to be loud and proud about our sport. We want to do two things. We want to put out films that are delicious, like when we put a camera on the back of a golden eagle and hunt hares with it. It's fun, it's exciting, and it captures the imagination. And we want to put out films that are nutritious as well. We want to do a year in the life of a grouse moor. We did it a couple of years ago. I think it's done very well. I think it has said a lot about what goes on grouse moors, and we know, well, we have heard from people in the Scottish Government that they've watched it and they've taken it in. Thanks to you, we've been able to make the films we've made in Malta. We've been there for 3 years now, every year since they won the referendum on hunting in Malta. Is Al Gabriel here? Al's not here. Al was in earlier. We made a film about him. He's a Field Sports Channel shareholder. He is from Ethiopia. He now lives in the north of England. He loves stalking. He's an ethnic minority who hunts. Some of us find that very, very irrelevant. I put this to the Field Sports Channel shareholders. You almost unanimously voted for us to make that film, so we made that film. And we've made we are making two whole new series about cooking with game meat. It's been a bit of a tirade, this talk. I'm going to come on to the Q&A section in a second, but I want to leave David just to sum up what I've been talking about.
And finally, here's a special appeal. If you care about the way field sports is being treated online, help fund the fight back. Please buy shares in Field Sports Channel. Keep us stalking the stories and fishing for the truth.
Thank you very much. Now, anybody, not just Field Sports Channel shareholders, questions about what we're doing or about what's happening in the wider internet media. Media is on the internet. Does anybody have a question? One down here.
You're mentioning your man with the soap and you're trying to get to interview him. How about just buying 1 or 2 shares in his company, and then you can go to the board meetings, or the annual general meeting, where you can then put your point to him?
That's an extremely good idea. Make a note, Miss Brahms, please. Thank you. We will definitely be doing that. We did. I rang him up. I rang up his people. They said he's not available, which is usually their way of saying Well, yeah, but we might come back to you, but they clearly, I emailed him, I rang up again. I think that's going to be the way to it. Thank you for that. Good suggestion. Any other questions? Nigel Appleton.
Can we be more aggressive in our tackling of the people like Chris Packham, rather than wait for him to do something and then try and contradict what he said? Actually start to put a program together that says, look, this is the guy and this is where he's wrong on so many counts. Let's actually tackle him head on.
Yes, we can, and no, we can't. He carries a constituency with him, clearly. He has the backing of the BBC. We've seen that again and again, although they will say he's not officially a BBC presenter. We can catch him out on hypocrisy, and we will catch him out on hypocrisy. I mean, we've toyed with the idea of the fact that he illegally kept a kestrel when he was a kid. And he's clearly a falconer and somebody who captures passage birds, which is a crime. They won't stick because he was a kid. But we're looking for things like that. On the subject of catching him out on the facts, unfortunately, I think it's about emotion. And when he is presenting that Fred the Eagle piece, which you've just seen, he's doing it with gloomy music and a bit of a downturned corner of his mouth. And he's got his folk on his side. And even if we say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, I'm afraid we're mostly appealing to our folk. But we will get him. We will get him. Anybody else? One more here.
I'll ask a question. On the DPO news that you send out to the shareholders, it says it's unlisted on YouTube, so please don't share it around too much unless you'll send it to a potential shareholder. But on the Field Sports channel, which goes out on YouTube, you clearly state about the shareholders and your future plans.
I probably shouldn't have put that on there. I mean, so unlisted on YouTube means you can't find it. But it's there, so if you've got the link, you can watch it. Public on YouTube means you can find it and it's promoted by YouTube, and then you have private and you can just share it amongst a few people. The reason I did it unlisted is because, well, I talk about some quite sensitive company information with you. I mean, I do because you're the owners, so the reason I do that is because I want you to be very, very involved in what we're doing, because we're half we're half a business and we are also half a campaigning filmmaker. So we want to do both those things. I suppose the only thing I'm worried about is if it fell into the hands of, if I'm doing a rant about something and it fell into their hands, they might be able to come back about it. But no, I'm very happy officially for you to share it with anybody you think is suitable. But I'm not going to make it public. I'm not going to make it a public video. Does that answer the question?
I was just wondering why it was on there. That was the main thing, when it's clearly out on YouTube.
Does it work for you? I'm getting a sense that about half the people I send it out to, so half of the 400 shareholders are watching it and reacting it.
Yeah, I'll watch it as soon as it comes in usually. So.
Terrific, thank you. Anybody else? One over here in a Mac. Now, I've got to ask you, are you here just to get out of the rain?
Picking up on this gentleman's point here, I did a big charity shoot in the summer with Adam Henson. So instead of digging the dirt on Chris Packham, who we all hate, why don't you pick up someone like Adam Henson, who is heavily into his field sports, and try and get him on our side, so that, all the good that field sports does, and the shoot that I did in the summer raised nearly £500,000 for charity. And I actually said to Adam Henson, why isn't this on a half-hour slot on Country File? And he just went, it's the BBC. So why aren't we reaching out to a wider audience? I think that would be much more beneficial than trying to dig the dirt on, Chris Packham, for instance.
Is it celebrity you're particularly interested in?
Well, whoever gets the message out, I don't mind, but I just feel that we need to reach a wider audience. I mean, I shoot, I'm absolutely addicted, and the good that it does. I mean, there's a charity shoot throughout the year once a week, and it's never, ever televised or on YouTube, and it's such a shame because the shooting fraternity is doing such a great job.
Thank you for that. I'm going to give you several answers to that, which I hope adds up to a complete answer. One of the strands from that question is about celebrity and how we could use it to improve the image of field sports. One of the strands is about the the publicity surrounding shooting. We're not going to get the BBC to cover that. I mean, the BBC makes up its own mind about things, and we are in a world where the BBC will not do this for the moment. Good news on that is, as of next year, the BBC are going to be the third largest broadcaster in the UK. We already have Netflix, and Apple is entering the market as well. So we're going to see the BBC moving a little bit down the pecking order, which might do them a little bit of good. On the subject of celebrity, on YouTube, it's slightly different to the BBC. On the BBC, it's a very top-down method of communicating. You're kind of telling people what to think, and they've been doing this very effectively. It works. We love it. You know, it's replaced the fireplace in all of our front rooms in the last 60 years. YouTube is much better characterised as social TV. You put your arm around the viewer, and you're their friend, and you explain to them what you do, but you don't say, I want you to do this thing. You say, I would like you to think about this thing, or go and research some more about this thing. And strangely, I think as a result of that, celebrity itself doesn't work. Personality works. I mean, we talk about this sometimes, the endorsement weight or value of people we use. And you could say, you know, here is a C-list athlete. Here is the doorman of the Ritz. The doorman of the Ritz, we don't know their name, but they're probably as accessible to the viewer as the C-list athlete, because we kind of know who we think they ought to be, who they should be. So from a BBC point of view, using either of those is fine. We actually, on YouTube, don't mind who we use, as long as they're good at putting things across. And one of the paid tributes to David, particularly, who came from ITV, who came from a top-down broadcasting background, one of the things he's done very well is find people like Andy Crowe, Roy Lupton, who are just lovely people. You know, they will put their arm around you, so to speak, every Wednesday night and tell you what they think. On the publicity side, YouTube gets an awful lot of views. We are watched by 9 million individual people over the last 540 days. We get 1.5 million views a month. It's a slightly unfair comparison, but that is more than any single programme on Sky and almost every single programme on the BBC and ITV, individual programme. So when you do something with Adam Henson, we need to be told about it. We're only 6 people, and we just can't reach out. And one of the things the shareholders have been extremely good at is posting in news from parts of the country that I don't cover, that I don't get to, that David doesn't get to. And it doesn't matter how wobbly it is, it just establishes that sense of reach we all have. So please, if you can, phone it in or email it in. There was another element of the question, but there's so many layers to that question, I can't quite remember what it was. I know what the other one was. It was, is that we shouldn't hit Chris Packham, we should just be being positive. And I absolutely agree we should be being positive. That is essentially what all of the best shooting and hunting channels on YouTube are doing. They're being positive. But I want to add this extra component. We have got to be alive to the fact that we can possibly bring down a Packham. And the reason is it's actually an unwritten organisation policy. If we can marginalise the antis, if we can make that 1% of the country that is virulently anti-hunting into a 0.5% or 0.25%, it makes it more difficult for the 98% who don't really care either way to follow their lead. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Anybody else? Would anybody else like to ask anything? Why not Nigel again? That's right. I'm not judging you badly for this. I'm just saying Nigel again, all right?
Following on the lady's point, which I think is absolutely excellent, if the BBC aren't going to do something about all the good that shooting does, I mean, simply taking, over the course of a year, charity shoots raise 10 million quid, for example, can Field Sports Channel TV do that and take a half-hour programme to Channel 4 or Amazon or somebody like that? Is there any marketing potential in that?
Yes, so should we be on terrestrial TV? So I'm going to go back to that point about the fact we are already reaching a lot of people. We're already in the very, very public space. I know you feel like we're mostly watched by shooters, but that we're also watched by people who are finding out about our sport, that sort of crucial decision-making process. Do I want to get into shooting? Let's have a look at YouTube and find out about it. Or falconry, or ferreting, or fox hunting. One of my great hopes is that what Field Sports Channel does is present a version, it's always a version, of all those sports that's attractive and works. We have been to broadcasters. We went to BT when they were launching. I met this extremely depressed TV executive out in their studios in Stratford in East London, which they took over after the Olympics left. He said, we just bought 57 hours of the Premiership. He said, we've got about 13,000 other hours to fill. I don't know how I'm going to do it. However, in the end, it was what we do was just too much for him. The idea of animals falling over on terrestrial and satellite is, whether it is officially or whether it is in their heads a regulatory problem, they just didn't want to do it. They did look at the fishing programme we were making at the time quite seriously. Aaron, who's sitting on the desk at the back, was making Fishing Britain for us, and I hope, thanks to this investment round, he'll be making it for us again, as long as we can get it funded by the trade. And we got pretty close, but in the end, actually, they picked another fishing programme, and they couldn't have too much fishing. So, you know, fair dues, we tried. We are on cable TV in South Africa, not a very big channel, and I have heard that we are on a cable channel in San Diego and in Lisbon and on 2 in Russia. Both of the last 2 are illegal because they didn't ask our permission. But we have in the past said to people, look, if you want to download it from the internet and run it on your cable channel, you know, you local TV person, then just go for your life. You know, we issue a 12-month license in perpetuity until we tell you to stop. And my guess is eventually digital television, YouTube, or wherever we are, we're not tied to YouTube. It's a very, very good place to be. It has 1.8 billion users, and we can get to the shooting element and a wider element than that. But we are better off there, I think, until somebody comes to me, Alistair Fothergill from the BBC, and begs me to put Field Sports Britain on BBC One. Then I'll do it. Any more questions? Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to pick anything up privately by email, of course you risk being outed in my weekly vlog. If you want to buy shares in Field Sports Channel, visit fieldsportschannel.tv/shares. It'll explain how. But thank you very much to all of you who've supported Field Sports Channel TV, and to all who just watch it, thank you to you too. Thank you.